Blood and Circuitry. Chapter 1. The Rise of Nova Roma. In the 28th century, the dream of Rome was reborn. Nova Roma, a grand city of order, strength, and dominion, stretched across the stars, its towering marble structures fused with sleek, glowing, neon veins. Airships drifted majestically above, while the streets bustled with people clad in a fusion of Roman togas and modern attire. At the heart of this thriving metropolis, the Imperium Aurelius ruled with an iron fist, guiding its citizens, under ancient principles of duty, honor, and conquest. But beneath the polished veneer of Nova Roma lay a brewing struggle, a battle for the very soul of the empire. As citizens went about their daily lives, the vibrant marketplaces thrummed with energy. Traders called out their wares, and children learned under the watchful eyes of their teachers. Soldiers marched in disciplined formations, their presence a constant reminder of the Council of Elders' authority. Clad in robes that echoed the grandeur of ancient Rome, these leaders issued decrees that resonated with the laws of old. Yet, for many the price of this order was too high. While some embraced the stability the Imperium offered, others found themselves marginalized and oppressed, their voices stifled under the weight of tradition. Whispers of dissent lingered in the shadows, growing louder with each passing day. In a dimly lit chamber, a group of rebels gathered for a clandestine meeting. They wore tattered garments adorned with symbols of resistance, their faces etched with determination. At the center stood the rebel leader, a fierce woman whose eyes burned with conviction. "We stand on the precipice of change," she declared, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "The Imperium Aurelius may cloak itself in glory, but we see the truth beneath the surface, a facade built on oppression and fear. It is time to reclaim our destiny." Around her, the rebels listened intently. One, a young man with a fiery spirit, nodded vigorously. "I've seen my friends taken by the guards for speaking out. We cannot stay silent any longer. The people need to know they are not alone." Another rebel, his face a mask of worry, glanced nervously around the chamber. "But what can we do? The council has the power of the military behind them. If we rise up, we risk everything." The leader stepped forward, her resolve unshaken. "And if we do nothing, we lose everything. The Imperium's strength is built on our submission. We must unite and show them we will not be silenced." One of the rebels, an older man, projected a holographic display of Nova Roma, zooming in on the areas controlled by the council. "Look here. The council's guards are stationed heavily at the Forum of Unity. If we strike there during the Festival of Honor, we can gather support from those who are disillusioned." "Yes," the young man exclaimed. "Many citizens will be there. We can rally them to our cause. It's a chance to show the council that we are no longer afraid." Meanwhile, in a grand chamber adorned with opulent decorations, the Council of Elders discussed the rising dissent. They were a formidable group, their faces set in grim determination. "We cannot allow this insurrection to grow," one elder warned, leaning forward. "It threatens our very way of life. We must act swiftly and decisively to crush any notion of rebellion." "But what if we escalate the situation?" another council member said nervously. "The citizens are already uneasy. We risk losing their support." The elder's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "Loyalty can be forged through strength. We must remind them of the consequences of defiance. Send more guards into the streets. Let them feel our presence." "And what of the Festival of Honor?" a council member interjected. "It's a critical time for unity. If we strike hard now, we risk inciting chaos during our most sacred event." "Then we will use the festival to our advantage," the elder replied with cold resolve. "We will show a united front, and when the rebels make their move, we will crush them." Back in the rebels' meeting, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. The leader spoke with determination. "Tomorrow we make our stand. We will gather at the Forum. If we are to reclaim our city, we must act now." One rebel, filled with trepidation, asked, "And if the guards come? We could be slaughtered." "Then we die fighting for our freedom." the leader proclaimed, her voice rising. Better to fall as warriors than live as slaves. Nova Roma stood on the brink of conflict, a city poised to be reshaped by the clash between the unwavering hold of tradition and the fiery aspirations of a new generation. The skies darkened, foreshadowing the storm that was about to break over this magnificent city as the flame of rebellion began to ignite. Chapter 2. Shadows of rebellion beneath the shimmering skyline of Nova Roma, in the labyrinthine alleys far from the opulent halls of the council, the resistance prepared for war. The Festival of Honor was only hours away, and with it, their first true stand against the Imperium. In a hidden bunker carved into the remnants of an abandoned aqueduct, the rebel leader, Cassius Varro, stood before her gathered warriors. A hollow map of the Forum of Unity flickered before them, its blue glow casting ghostly shadows across their faces. Cassia's gaze swept across the room. Tomorrow we strike. We march into the Forum not as beggars or fugitives, but as free men and women. The Council must see that their rule is no longer absolute. Her second in command, a former centurion named Darius Valens, crossed his arms. His cybernetic arm whirred slightly as he adjusted his stance. And when they respond with force, you know they will, Cassius smirked. Then we will respond in kind. A murmur rippled through the rebels. Some had never held a weapon before. Others were weary of the blood that would inevitably be spilled. A young recruit, barely out of adolescence, stepped forward. His name was Felix, and though his hands trembled, his voice held firm. My father was taken last month for questioning. He never returned. If we don't fight, we're already dead. Darius placed a reassuring hand on Felix's shoulder. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to stand despite it. He turned to Cassia. The city is watching, and so is the council. If we fail tomorrow, there won't be another chance. Cassia's eyes darkened. Then we won't fail. The rebels dispersed to prepare. Some sharpened blades forged from scavenged steel, while others programmed drones to disrupt the Imperium's surveillance systems. Cassia lingered at the hollow map, deep in thought. Lost in strategy? Darius asked, approaching. She sighed. No, lost in possibilities. If we succeed, we change the course of history. If we fail... Darius exhaled. There are no more what-ifs, Cassia. Only action. She nodded. Then we act. Above them, in the towering spires of the Senate Hall, the Council of Elders convened in secret. The air was thick with tension. This rebellion festers, muttered Elder Aelius, his bejeweled fingers tapping against the marble table. If we allow them to disrupt the festival, it will inspire others to rise. Elder Livia, an advocate for balance, leaned forward. Crushing them outright may only fuel the flames. If we move with precision, we can cut off their leadership and let the rest wither. Aelius scoffed. And risk looking weak? No, we must strike hard and fast. We will deploy the Praetorian Guard. By dawn, the rebellion will be a memory. At the head of the table, Imperator Septimus Aurelius, ruler of Nova Roma, steepled his fingers. His piercing eyes gleamed with calculated resolve. Let them march, he said. Let them believe they have won the people's favor. Then we will remind them why Nova Roma has stood for centuries. The rebels believe they fight for freedom. Tomorrow, we will show them that order is the only path to true strength. As the meeting concluded, Septimus stood and gazed out over his empire. Below, the city lights shimmered like stars, but even the brightest lights cast deep shadows. Tomorrow, those shadows would bleed. Chapter 3. The Festival of Honor. The morning sun bathed Nova Roma in golden light, illuminating the city in all its splendor. The streets brimmed with citizens draped in ceremonial robes, their faces painted with the symbols of the gods. Laughter and music filled the air as the people gathered in the Forum of Unity, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Cassia and her rebels moved through the crowd, blending seamlessly. Beneath their ceremonial cloaks, they carried concealed weapons, energy daggers, EMP disruptors, and compact pulse rifles. Felix walked beside Cassia, his hands clenched into fists. They're celebrating a world that doesn't belong to them, he muttered. They don't see the suffering. Cassia met his gaze. They will. Across the forum, the council had taken their place on a raised platform, watching the festivities unfold. Imperator Septimus, dressed in golden ceremonial armor, surveyed the crowd with the gaze of a warlord studying the battlefield. Darius spoke into his comm unit. All units in position. We move on your signal, Cassia. Cassia took a breath. The moment had arrived. Stepping forward, she climbed onto a statue's pedestal and raised her voice. People of Nova Roma, for too long, we have lived under the illusion of peace, bound by the chains of the Imperium. Today, we reclaim our voices. The revelers turned, murmuring among themselves. Some looked on with curiosity, others with concern. Imperator Septimus narrowed his eyes. He gestured to his guards, who moved subtly into formation. Cassia continued. We do not seek chaos. We seek justice. We seek a Nova Roma where no citizen is a slave to power. Felix, emboldened, raised his voice. They took my father for speaking out. How many of you have lost loved ones to the Imperium's tyranny? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Citizens exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded. Others stepped away, fearful of association. Then a voice rang out from the council's platform. Imperator Septimus himself. Lies, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the forum. The Imperium does not enslave. It protects. It preserves. It brings order to chaos. He gestured around them. Look at what we have built. A civilization that has endured while others have crumbled. Would you throw it all away for reckless idealism? Cassia pointed at him. This is not order, it is control. We are not children to be ruled by fear. We demand a choice. Septimus's lips curled into a smirk. Then allow me to show you what your choice has earned you. With a subtle nod, he gave the order. The Praetorian Guard emerged from the crowd, their armor glinting in the sunlight. Energy shields snapped to life, forming a wall between the rebels and the people. From above, sentry drones hummed as they powered their weapons. The forum erupted into chaos. Felix barely had time to react before a guard swung at him. He ducked, rolling away as Cassia pulled him to his feet. Move, she shouted. Darius fired the first shot, his pulse rifle striking, a guard square in the chest. The explosion sent a ripple through the crowd, panic screams, the rush of bodies scattering in every direction. Cassia fought her way forward, striking down a guard with a swift slash of her blade. Felix! Get to the rendezvous point! Felix hesitated. But go! He ran. Around him, the Festival of Honor had become a battlefield. Citizens screamed as guards clashed with rebels, energy bolts lighting up the air. Smoke curled toward the sky as fires erupted across the forum. From the platform, Septimus watched with cold detachment. The rebellion had finally shown its face. Now he would make an example of them. And in that moment, Nova Roma's fate was sealed. Chapter 4. The ashes of unity smoke coiled through the air, turning the once proud Forum of Unity into a battlefield. The golden banners of Nova Roma, once symbols of strength, now burned, their fabric curling into embers against the darkening sky. Cassia sprinted through the chaos, cutting down a Praetorian soldier with a precise stroke of her energy blade. Fall back, she shouted over the screams and weapons fire. We regroup in the catacombs. The rebels, battered but unbroken, fought their way through the riotous streets. Citizens scattered in all directions, some fleeing, some fighting, and others frozen in horror as the mighty Praetorian Guard crushed all resistance in their path. Darius covered the retreat, his cybernetic arm absorbing the impact of an energy bolt as he fired back with deadly precision. They're trying to encircle us. Felix, his heart pounding, stayed close to Cassia. His hands trembled as he raised his pulse pistol, barely dodging a Praetorian blade. A guard lunged at him, too fast, too strong. Cassia intercepted, driving her. blade through the soldier's chest. Blood spattered Felix's face. He stumbled back, gasping. "You freeze, you die," Cassius snapped, pulling him to his feet. "Keep moving." As they pushed through the collapsing marketplace, a massive rumbling shook the ground beneath them. Cassius turned just in time to see the Imperium unleash its greatest weapon. The Titans had arrived. Towering war machines, plated in gleaming Roman gold and steel, emerged from the smoke. Each stood over 10 meters tall, their mechanical limbs crafted to resemble the statues of old gods. Their eyes glowed with artificial intelligence, scanning for threats. Then they fired. The first Titan released a torrent of plasma, incinerating a group of rebel fighters in an instant. The ground cracked beneath its steps, its very presence an overwhelming declaration of imperial might. A woman in the crowd screamed. Citizens fell to their knees in terror. Cassia clenched her jaw. This is their answer to rebellion. Fear. One of the Titans raised a mechanical fist and slammed it into a crumbling building, sending debris raining down on the retreating rebels. Felix barely managed to roll aside as the rubble crashed where he had stood moments before. "They're going to wipe us all out," Felix cried, staggering to his feet. Cassia's mind raced. The Titans were powerful, but they weren't invincible. She had studied their design. Each one was powered by a core housed in the Aurelian Citadel, the heart of Nova Roma's military power. If they could take out the power cores, the Titans would fall. But first they had to escape. A Titan turned its glowing gaze toward them, locking on. Cassia grabbed Felix and shoved him forward. "Run!" The war machine unleashed a volley of plasma rounds. The street behind them exploded in fire and molten stone. The heat singed Cassia's back as she dove into an alleyway, Darius following close behind. "The catacombs," Darius shouted. "We have to get underground." Cassia nodded, leading them down a narrow passage. Rebels and surviving citizens followed in desperation. They reached the entrance to the catacombs, a collapsed temple with an old staircase descending into darkness. "Go," Cassia ordered, ushering the others in. Felix hesitated, glancing back. "What about the people still trapped up there?" Darius put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll come back for them, but if we die now, there's no one left to fight." Reluctantly, Felix followed them into the depths. Beneath the Empire, the catacombs stretched for miles beneath Nova Roma. Once ancient burial grounds, they had been repurposed into tunnels of resistance, hidden sanctuaries for those who opposed the Imperium. Flickering torches cast shadows across the stone walls. Rebels, wounded and exhausted, tended to the injured. Some sat in silence, processing the horrors they had witnessed. Others whispered among themselves, fear thick in their voices. Cassia leaned against the wall, catching her breath. She wiped blood, her own and others, from her face. Darius slumped beside her, checking the damage to his cybernetic arm. That did not go as planned. Cassia let out a bitter laugh. No, it didn't. Felix sat across from them, staring at his trembling hands. "We lost." Cassia looked at him sharply. "No, we survived. And as long as we live, the fight isn't over." Felix swallowed hard. "But the Titans, they're not invincible," Cassia interrupted. "Their power comes from the Citadel. If we can get inside, if we can destroy the power cores." Darius raised an eyebrow. "You want to break into the most heavily fortified place in Nova Roma?" Cassia met his gaze. "I don't want to. I have to." The room fell silent. Then one by one the rebels nodded. Felix exhaled, steadying himself. "Then how do we get inside?" Cassia's lips curled into a determined smirk. "We walk through the front door." Meanwhile, in the Aurelian Citadel high above the burning city, in the heart of the Imperium's power, Chapter 5. The Tyrant's Gambit Beneath the Empire. The dim torchlight flickered against the damp stone walls of the catacombs. The tunnels, carved by ancestors long before Nova Roma rose to power, now sheltered the last hope of its downfall. Cassia stood at the center of a makeshift war council. A group of weary but determined rebels gathered around her. Some nursed wounds from the battle in the Forum, Others whispered prayers to gods both old and new. They all knew the truth. This war was no longer just about the Imperium or the rebellion. It was about survival. She slammed a dagger into the crude map laid across the wooden table. The Aurelian Citadel, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. The heart of the Imperium. The control center for the Titans. The place where our fate will be decided. Darius, sitting nearby with his cybernetic arm sparking slightly from the last battle, scoffed. You make it sound easy. Felix frowned. We don't even know how to get inside, let alone sabotage the power cores. Cassia's gaze darkened. We do now. She reached into her belt and pulled out a small data disk, placing it on the table. A nearby rebel activated the device, projecting a three-dimensional hologram of the Citadel. It was a fortress of impossible grandeur. Towering spires, heavy, fortifications and legions of Praetorian guards patrolling every entrance. But Cassia pointed to a series of tunnels beneath the structure. The Imperium thinks we're trapped down here. What they don't know is that these catacombs lead directly beneath the Citadel. Felix's eyes widened. You're saying there's a way inside? Cassia nodded. An old access tunnel used by engineers centuries ago, forgotten by most. It was sealed when the Imperium installed the Titan control systems, but we can break through. Darius leaned forward, inspecting the hologram. That gets us inside. But what about the power cores? They'll be heavily guarded. A voice from the shadows spoke up. That's where I come in. All eyes turned as Lucius Varro, a former Imperial engineer turned rebel, stepped forward. His face bore the scars of past servitude under the Imperium, but his mind remained sharp as ever. I helped design the Titan energy grid, he said. Each war machine draws its power from the Aurelius core, located deep within the Citadel. If we disable it, the Titans will collapse. Darius raised an eyebrow. Disable or destroy? Lucius smirked. Preferably destroy. Cassia crossed her arms. How? Lucius pulled out a small metallic device, a compact energy disruptor. If we place these charges at key relay points, the energy will overload, causing a chain reaction that will take the entire core offline. Felix's expression was grim. And what happens to the Citadel when that happens? Lucius hesitated. It won't be standing. Silence filled the room. Cassia took a deep breath. Then we make sure we're not inside when it blows. Darius exhaled, shaking his head. This is madness. Cassia gave a half smile. This is war. She turned back to the rebels. We move at dawn, get some rest. Tomorrow we make history. The Imperium strikes. As the rebels finalized their plans, above them the Imperium was already moving. At the top of the Aurelian Citadel, Imperator Septimus Aurelius stood on his balcony, surveying the city. Fires still burned in the Forum, the scars of battle marring his perfect empire. He tightened his grip on the railing. A Praetorian officer approached. Imperator, the rebels have retreated underground. Our forces are preparing to flood the tunnels. Septimus turned, his golden cloak billowing behind him. No, he said coldly. The officer hesitated. Sir? Septimus clasped his hands behind his back. I want them to believe they have hope. Let them make their plans. Let them gather their strength. And when they emerge, we will crush them. The officer bowed. As you command. Septimus watched the smoke rise from the city. He had ruled Nova Roma with an iron fist, and he would see it burn before he let it fall to rebellion. Infiltration. The next night, under the cover of darkness, the rebels moved. Cassia led the team through the narrow tunnels, their footsteps muffled by centuries of dust. The air was thick with the scent of old stone and damp earth. Darius walked beside her, checking his weapons. You sure about this tunnel? Cassia smirked. Trust me. Ahead, Lucius reached the sealed wall where the old maintenance tunnel had been blocked off. He pulled out a compact drill and began cutting through the barrier. Sparks flew as the metal groaned under the pressure. Felix shifted nervously. This is taking too long. Cassia put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Stay calm. We're almost there. Finally, the barrier gave way. revealing a passage leading into the underbelly of the citadel. Lucius grinned. After you. The rebels moved in, the power core inside the citadel. The halls gleamed with cold opulence. Statues of past emperors lined the corridors, their eyes hollow and watchful. Cassius signaled for silence as they approached the central chamber. 2 Praetorian guards stood at the entrance. Darius moved swiftly, silencing one before he could react. Cassius dispatched the other. They stepped inside. The Aurelius core pulsed before them, a massive sphere of raw energy contained within a reinforced vault. Dozens of power conduits snaked from it, feeding the titans above. Lucius pulled out the disruptor charges. We placed them on the conduits. 5 minutes and this place is rubble. Felix worked quickly, setting the charges along the relay points. The rebels moved with the efficiency of warriors who knew they had little time. Then the alarms blared. Cassia's blood ran cold. They knew we were coming. The doors slammed open. Praetorian soldiers poured in, plasma rifles raised, and at the center of them stood Imperator Septimus Aurelius. Cassia locked eyes with him. You, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I should have known you would come. She drew her blade. And I should have killed you when I had the chance. Septimus unsheathed his gladius. Then take your chance. The final battle had begun. Chapter 6. The Fall of the Imperium, the Standoff. The chamber housing the Aurelius core pulsed with raw energy, casting eerie shadows against the towering walls. Cassia gripped her sword, her muscles tensed, as Imperator Septimus Aurelius stood before her, his golden gladius gleaming under the flickering light. Around them, dozens of Praetorian guards formed a solid line, their crimson-plated armor making them look like statues of war brought to life. The rebels were surrounded. Felix swallowed hard. This is bad. Darius cocked his pulse rifle. Yeah, no kidding. Septimus stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Cassia's. You fight like a cornered beast, he said, his voice calm, almost amused. Desperate. Reckless. But tell me, Cassia, do you truly believe you can kill an emperor? Cassia didn't flinch. You're no emperor, just a tyrant wearing a dead empire's crown. Septimus smirked. And yet here I stand while Rome still breathes, while your rebellion dies in the dirt. Cassia's grip on her blade tightened. We're not dead yet. The battle begins. Septimus raised a hand. Kill them all. The Praetorians moved as one, charging forward like a crimson tide. The room exploded into chaos. Cassia lunged at Septimus, their blades clashing with a deafening clang. He was fast, too. Fast. His movements were precise, honed by years of combat. Every strike he delivered forced her back, her muscles screaming in protest. Darius and Felix fought to hold the line against the elite Praetorians. Felix fired his pulse pistol wildly, barely managing to dodge a soldier's blade. Darius, relying on his cybernetic arm, delivered crushing blows, sending armored guards crashing into the walls. Lucius, crouched by the power core, worked frantically. The energy disruptors were set, but he needed time to activate them. We need 3 minutes, he shouted. Cassia gritted her teeth. 3 minutes might as well be an eternity. Septimus pressed the attack, forcing her onto the defensive. His gladius carved through the air with lethal precision. Cassia barely dodged a strike aimed for her throat, countering with a desperate slash that nicked his cheek. He touched the wound and smiled. You still have fight in you. Good. He struck with renewed fury, his blade slicing across Cassia's arm. She hissed in pain but didn't falter. Felix, seeing her struggle, turned his pistol toward Septimus. Cassia, move. Cassia ducked just in time as Felix fired. The plasma bolt shot toward the Imperator, and Septimus caught it. With a swift, fluid motion, he activated his energy gauntlet, absorbing the shot before hurling the stored energy back. Felix barely rolled aside as the blast incinerated a pillar behind him. Damn it, Darius shouted. He's got a power shield. Septimus advanced, his steps deliberate. This is why your rebellion is doomed. You rely on hope, on luck. I rely on power. Cassia gritted her teeth. Then let's see what happens when you're... Power is ripped away. She lunged again, aiming for the gauntlet. The two warriors clashed, locked in a deadly dance while the rebels fought desperately to hold off the Imperial forces. The Titans awaken, then the entire citadel trembled. A mechanical roar echoed through the chamber. A nearby Praetorian stumbled. Even Septimus paused for a fraction of a second. Darius glanced at Lucius. "Tell me that was you." Lucius's eyes widened in horror. "No, that was them." Above, the Titans, the towering war machines of the Imperium, began to awaken. The Aurelius core was still active, feeding them power. The disruption had triggered an automatic defense protocol. On the surface, the massive golden Titans turned, their glowing eyes toward the battlefield. The city trembled as they began marching toward the catacombs, toward the last remnants of the rebellion. Below, a metallic voice echoed through the chamber. Titan control protocol initiated. Purging. Threats to the Imperium. Lucius's face went pale. They're turning on everyone. The Titans did not distinguish between friend and foe. Anyone not inside the command system was a target. Septimus's gaze flickered toward the core. For the first time, Cassia saw something like concern in his eyes. Cassia grinned through her pain. "Looks like your own machines don't trust you either." Septimus's fury ignited. "I will end you before this city falls." The battle intensified. The final stand Felix dove behind a fallen statue as Titan plasma fire rained down from above, obliterating the walls of the chamber. Lucius screamed over the chaos. "Cassia, we have to go now. If the core goes up while we're still here..." Cassia barely dodged a killing blow from Septimus. She knew she couldn't win in a direct fight, but she didn't have to. She glanced at Lucius. "How much longer?" 30 seconds. Cassia turned back to Septimus, her mind racing. She had one chance. She lowered her sword, breathing hard, feigning exhaustion. "You win, Imperator." Septimus paused, suspicious. "Begging for mercy?" Cassia smirked. "No, just buying time." Septimus's eyes widened. Lucius hit the final activation switch. The Aurelius core erupted. A shockwave tore through the chamber, sending energy surging through the conduits. Sparks rained down as the entire citadel trembled. The Titans above collapsed mid-stride, their power sources severed. The golden war machines, once symbols of imperial might, fell like broken gods, crashing into the streets of Nova Roma. Cassia used the distraction to lunge. Her blade pierced Septimus's side. The Imperator gasped, his golden armor stained red. He staggered back, gripping his wound. For the first time, the Emperor of Nova Roma looked mortal. "You," he rasped, rage and disbelief flickering in his eyes. Cassia withdrew her sword. "This is for everyone you crushed beneath your rule." Septimus dropped to his knees, staring at the flames engulfing the citadel. The rebels ran, escaping just as the power core detonated. The explosion consumed the chamber, the imperial palace collapsing in on itself, and with it, the age of the Imperium ended. The dawn of a new era. The next morning, Nova Roma burned. But the banners of the rebellion flew high. Cassia stood on the ruined steps of the citadel, overlooking the shattered city. The people gathered, thousands of citizens and soldiers alike, staring at her, waiting for a new future. Felix limped to her side. "So, what now?" Cassia exhaled, watching the sun rise over the ruins of the old empire. "We build something better. The age of tyranny was over, and the age of freedom had begun." Chapter 7. Ashes and Rebirth. The ruins of Nova Roma. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and iron. Nova Roma, once a symbol of imperial grandeur, was now a city of ruins. The once proud Aurelian citadel lay in smoldering rubble, its golden spires shattered, its marble halls reduced to dust. The streets were lined with the wreckage of fallen Titan war machines, their metallic husks lifeless. And yet, through the wreckage, the people emerged. Citizens, soldiers, rebels, and former Imperium loyalists alike stood amidst the ruins, staring at a future they could not yet define. Cassia, her armor scorched and her sword still stained with the blood of battle, stood on the crumbling steps of the forum gazing at the thousands gathered before her. She had spent years fighting for this moment, but as the fires of war dimmed, a new battle loomed on the horizon. Felix limped up beside her, wincing as he clutched his bandaged side. "So, we won?" Cassia exhaled. "We won the war." Her eyes scanned the broken city. "But winning the peace? That's something else." Felix smirked. "You sound like an old senator already." Cassia turned, her expression unreadable. "Maybe we need one." Felix's smirk faded. The Imperium was gone, but what came next? The Council of the Broken City by nightfall. The surviving leaders of the rebellion, ex-senators and city officials gathered in the remains of the old Senate chamber, a building once reserved for imperial puppets, now repurposed as a council. For the future. The atmosphere was tense. The war was over, but unity was far from certain. At the center of the chamber, Cassia stood with Darius, Felix, and Lucius, surrounded by a mix of rebel commanders, former imperial officials, and common citizens. One of the ex-senators, a weathered man named Gaius Marcellus, stepped forward. "We may have destroyed the Imperium, but chaos will take its place if we do not act. The people need leadership." A former Praetorian officer, Tiberius Leto, folded his arms. "And who do you propose as leader?" "Cassia." "A warrior does not make a ruler," Felix bristled. "She did more for this city in a year than the Imperium did in centuries," Tiberius sneered. "The Imperium kept order. This victory of yours has left Nova Roma on the brink of collapse." Darius slammed his cybernetic fist on the table. "The Imperium enslaved its people and waged endless war. This isn't about keeping their order. It's about building a new one." A murmur rippled through the room. Cassia raised a hand. "Enough. We didn't fight to replace one dictator with another. We fought to give Nova Roma a choice." Marcellus nodded. "Then we must decide. Do we restore the Republic or build something new?" Silence fell. The Republic. The dream of the old world before emperors and conquest. A system built on law, debate, and the will of the people. But it had failed once. Would it fail again? Lucius, ever the strategist, finally spoke. "Restoring the Republic will take time. The people will demand stability now. If we don't give them that, warlords will rise to take what they can." Tiberius smirked. "Then perhaps we need a temporary ruler, someone to guide Nova Roma through the chaos." Cassia's stomach twisted. She knew what he was suggesting, a new imperator. The burden of power. Cassia left the chamber late that night, the weight of the conversation pressing on her shoulders. She walked through the ruined streets, past the survivors rebuilding their homes, past the banners of the rebellion now faded and tattered. Felix caught up to her. "Hey, you okay?" She didn't answer right away. "They want a ruler, Felix. They want someone to tell them what comes next." Felix gave a half smile. "Sounds like they're looking at you." Cassia sighed. "I fought to end rulers." Felix shrugged. "Maybe that's why you should be one." She stopped walking, turning to him. "No. If we replace the Imperium with another temporary leader, history will repeat itself. Septimus was once a temporary leader too." Felix hesitated, then nodded. "Then we do it the hard way." Cassia smirked. "The only way." They turned back toward the city. Tomorrow they would not fight with swords or rebellion. Tomorrow they would fight with ideas. A new dawn. The sun rose over Nova Roma, casting golden light across the ruins. In the rebuilt forum, thousands gathered to hear Cassia speak. The people, once subjects of the Imperium, now stood as free citizens, waiting for a future to be written. Cassia stepped forward, the whispers of the crowd dying as her voice rang out. "The Imperium has fallen. The chains that bound us are broken, but freedom is not given. It is built. It is defended. It is earned." She took a breath. "I will not take the throne. There will be no new imperator. The time of emperors is over. A stunned silence. Then, cheers erupted. Cassia raised her hand. Instead, we will rebuild. Together. We will forge a republic, not of the past, but of the future. One where power does not belong to one, but to all. Lucius, watching from the crowd, smirked. The dream of Rome had changed, but maybe, just maybe, this time it would last. Darius crossed his arms. She's going to need an army to keep that republic safe. Felix laughed. Yeah, but at least it'll be our army. The people of Nova Roma had chosen their path, and so from the ashes of the Imperium a new world was born, not an empire, not a kingdom, but a republic. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Past, the Weight of Victory. The dawn of the new Republic of Nova Roma was met with celebration, but Cassia knew better than to mistake the cheers of the people for lasting stability. Victory was the easy part. Governing was the real war. As the days passed, the scars of the old Imperium remained. The streets were lined with fallen statues of past emperors, their once gilded visages reduced to shattered stone. The remnants of Titan war machines were repurposed for construction, their energy cores salvaged to power homes instead of fueling destruction. Cassia stood atop the rebuilt Senate steps, watching the workers below. They carried materials salvaged from the ruins of the Aurelian citadel, building something new in its place. Felix approached from behind, arms crossed. Still brooding? Cassia turned, offering him a dry look. I don't brood. Felix smirked. Sure, and I don't get shot in every battle. He motioned toward the city. You did it, you know. People actually believe in this republic. Cassia exhaled. Belief isn't enough. The Imperium ruled for centuries. That kind of shadow doesn't fade overnight. She wasn't wrong. Old factions still lurked in the ruins. Some former senators whispered in back alleys about a return to monarchy. Mercenary groups and ex-imperial officers had retreated into the wastelands, waiting for a chance to strike. And worst of all, a new conspiracy was brewing. The assassin in the night. That night, Cassia awoke to the faintest sound of movement in her chamber. Her instincts screamed. Danger. She rolled from her bed just as a blade stabbed through the pillow, where her head had been. In the darkness, a shadowed figure lunged again, moving with unnatural speed. Cassia barely had time to react. She blocked the next strike with her forearm guard, sparks flying as the assassin's plasma dagger scraped against reinforced metal. She kicked out, knocking the figure back. In the dim light, she caught a glimpse of their armor, blackened steel marked with the sigil of the Imperium's secret intelligence force. Her stomach twisted. The Venatori, the Emperor's personal assassins. But the Emperor was dead. So who had sent them? The assassin vanished into the shadows, slipping out the window before she could pursue. A warning, not a killing blow. Cassia cursed, pressing a hand to the shallow cut on her arm. Someone in Nova Roma still wanted her dead. And, worse, they had the resources to send a Venatori after her. Council of the Republic by morning, the new Senate Hall was alive with heated debate. The attack on Cassia had sent a ripple of fear and paranoia through the government. The Imperium is dead, said Senator Marcellus, leaning forward with a grim expression. But its ghosts are still among us. If we do not act, they will strike again. Lucius, standing at Cassia's side, shook his head. We don't even know who sent the assassin. It could be remnants of the Praetorian Guard or rogue mercenaries, trying to plunge us into chaos. Tiberius Leto, the former Praetorian officer, scoffed. This is why we need a standing military force. The Republic is weak. A Senate cannot defend a city. Felix rolled his eyes. Oh yeah, great idea. Let's just start building legions again and see how long it takes before we have another emperor. Leto slammed his fist on the table. We are defenseless. Cassia finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. No, we are free, and that means we have enemies. She let the words settle before continuing. We will not rule by fear, but we will not be blind either. She turned to Lucius. We need intelligence. Find out who sent the assassin. Track down every former Imperial officer who still has power. Then to Tiberius. We will have an army, but not one controlled by a single ruler. The Republic will create a citizen guard. Volunteers trained and loyal not to me, not to a single person, but to the people. Leto frowned but nodded. That could work. Felix nudged Cassia. Look at you, making everyone compromise. You sure you don't want to be Imperator? Cassia shot him a glare. Shut up, Felix. The hunt begins. By nightfall, Lucius had leads. The assassin was Venatori. That much we know, he said, pacing inside the dimly lit war room. But more importantly, they came from within the city. Someone inside Nova Roma is funding them. Darius leaned forward. You're saying there's a traitor in the Senate? Lucius exhaled. Maybe more than one. Cassia clenched her jaw. The war had never truly ended. It had just changed forms. She looked at her gathered allies, Felix, Darius, Lucius, the people she trusted most. We need to find them, she said. And when we do, Darius smirked. We finish the war for Deo, good. Outside, the city of Nova Roma flickered with new life, new hope. But in the shadows, the old Imperium still breathed, and Cassia was ready for the fight. Chapter 9. The Wolves in the Senate. The gathering storm Cassia stood at the heart of Nova Roma's rebuilt Senate Hall, staring down at the gathered officials, military leaders, and former rebels now tasked with governing this fragile republic. The air inside the chamber was thick with tension. The assassination attempt had shaken the city and fear was beginning to spread. The citizens wanted answers. The Senate wanted security. And Cassia wanted justice. She placed both hands on the marble podium, her voice carrying through the chamber. The Venatori were never common assassins, she began, scanning the faces of the assembled leaders. They served only the Emperor, and yet one of them tried to kill me after the Imperium fell. Murmurs rippled through the Senate. Cassia continued. That means only one thing. Someone here, in this city, in this room, is trying to restore the old order. Silence. Then, Senator Marcellus rose to his feet. If there is a traitor among us, then they must be rooted out immediately. But we must tread carefully. We cannot let paranoia tear this republic apart before it even begins. Tiberius Leto, the former Praetorian commander, scoffed. Paranoia? An assassin nearly killed the leader of the rebellion. We should be rounding up every former imperial loyalist left in the city and... Lucius cut in. And what? Purge them? Drag them into the streets like the Imperium did to dissenters? His voice was sharp, his cybernetic eye glinting under the chamber's light. You want to restore order by becoming exactly what we just overthrew? Leto narrowed his eyes. You're a strategist, Lucius, not a soldier. This city will not survive without decisive action. Cassia raised a hand before the argument could spiral out of control. Enough. We will investigate quietly. If we start executing people on suspicion alone, we might as well invite another civil war. Darius, standing by her side, leaned in and muttered, I don't like this. The Venatori don't miss, Cassia. If they wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Cassia clenched her jaw. It was a message, a warning, and it meant the enemy was waiting for the right moment to strike. The Shadow Conspiracy. That night, Felix and Lucius led a covert investigation into the underbelly of Nova Roma. They moved through the slums of the lower districts, where remnants of the old regime still whispered in the dark. At a secluded tavern, an informant, a former imperial record-keeper named Varro, waited for them. You came looking for ghosts, Varro said, his voice rough with age. But the ghosts are already inside your city. Lucius leaned forward. Who ordered the hit on Cassia? Varro shook his head. The assassin didn't come from outside the city. They were housed, armed, and paid right here, under your noses. Felix scowled. Give us a name. Varro hesitated. I don't know exactly who, but I know where the orders came from. He lowered his voice. The Venatori were seen meeting with a faction of ex-imperial senators. People who swore loyalty to the Republic but still hold power in the shadows. Lucius exchanged a glance with Felix. Traitors inside the government itself. Where? Felix asked. Varro hesitated. Then he slid a sealed data chip across the table. This has everything I know, but be careful. The wolves wear the skins of senators. A Senate divided. By the next morning, Cassia, Lucius, and Felix gathered in a secure chamber beneath the Senate hall to review the data. When Lucius activated the chip, a holographic list of names appeared. Former imperial officials, praetorian, commanders and senators who had pledged allegiance to the Republic after the fall of the Imperium. And yet, these people are funding mercenaries and assassins. Lucius muttered, his jaw tightening. They've been planning something. Cassia studied the list, her expression unreadable. Among the names were several influential senators, Marcellus, Leto, a dozen others. Felix let out a slow breath. So the Senate really is compromised. Darius, arms crossed, nodded grimly. We should have seen this coming. The Imperium doesn't die easily. Cassia clenched her fists. Then we finished the job. The failed coup that night, under the cover of darkness, Cassia and her allies moved against the conspirators. Lucius led a strike team to seize key officials. Felix coordinated a citywide lockdown to prevent escape. Darius took charge of the citizen guard, ensuring the Senate building was secured. But when Cassia confronted Senator Marcellus in his private residence, she found him waiting for her. Surrounded by armed mercenaries, he smirked. Cassia, you're too late. Cassia drew her blade. I should have known it was you, Marcellus chuckled. You still don't understand, do you? The people of Nova Roma don't want a republic. They want order, strength, stability. You offer them chaos. Cassia stepped forward. The Imperium is dead. Marcellus's smile darkened. No, it was only sleeping. At that moment, explosions rocked the city. Saboteurs had struck the citizen guard barracks. Armed mercenaries poured into the streets. The coup had begun. Felix's voice crackled through Cassia's comm. Cassia, we've got a problem. The Senate building is under attack. Cassia turned back to Marcellus, who simply sighed. You could have ruled, you know, but instead you'll die with your precious republic. He raised his hand, signaling his guards to attack. Cassia lunged first. Blades clashed. Blood spilled. The fall of the traitors by dawn, the battle for Nova Roma had ended. Cassia stood over the lifeless body of Marcellus, his blood pooling on the marble floor of his estate. The coup had been crushed, but at great cost. Dozens of rebels and citizen guards had died. The city had burned in places, but the Republic had survived. In the Senate hall, the remaining officials gathered. Those who had supported the coup were arrested, their power stripped. Cassia stood before the assembled senators, her face grim but resolute. We have faced our first true test, and we have endured. She looked over the gathered leaders. The Republic was nearly strangled in its cradle, but it is still standing. Lucius, standing beside her, nodded. The wolves have been driven out, but others will come. Felix smirked tiredly. Yeah, well, let them come. We're still here. Darius crossed his arms. This won't be the last time someone tries to bring back the Imperium. Cassia exhaled. Then we'll be ready. The Republic had survived its first great challenge, but the war for its future had only just begun. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please press the like button, share, subscribe, comment.